All right, hey guys, today part of our lesson is going to be over the coordinate plane. So this is technically a review from 6th grade, but it's just a skill that's really easy to have. It's really important to master it, and most of you have it down, but since it's been, well, I go over it every year when we come back in just 2 months of summer, but especially now since we've been out of school for quite a while, it is important. It comes up forevermore all throughout your math classes. You will see the coordinate plane. You might see points, you might see shapes, or you might be plotting different things, but it's important to have a good understanding of it. And so we're just going to do a review, and then we're going to practice plotting some points. So just a couple things real fast is we have 2 number lines. This is what makes up the coordinate plane. So if you look, there we just have a horizontal number line, okay? So 0, and then we have our positives to the right and the negatives to the left. And then the same thing here with the vertical number line. And so we have 0, and then above 0 we have our positives, and below we have our negative numbers. So the number lines just intersect at 0, which is what we call the origin. And then we can go from there. So technically these are axis, and you know that you've learned it year after year that the horizontal one is the x-axis. And so if the horizontal is the x, then that means the vertical is the y. It's important to have those and make sure we don't mess those up, otherwise, because then we will plot all of the points backwards. So if you remember, we plot x before we plot the y, okay? Every single time. X and then y. So if you look down here, those are your points. This is going to be an x, this is going to be a y. But before we do all that, we're going to continue talking about the plane or the coordinate grid itself. So another word for the x-axis or the x value is also the independent value. So this is the independent value. It does not depend on the y value. It sets the stage, and then the y-axis, if the x is independent, then the y is dependent. So I'm just going to put dependent here to label it. Throughout the year on different questions, you might see it referred to as the independent and dependent axis, or the x and the y. Another thing about the coordinate grid or the coordinate plane is growing up, when you were first introduced to it, you saw only one quadrant. So you saw this one because you didn't used to use negative numbers. So we have positive x and our positive y's. So you were used to only seeing that. So now what we've done is we have kind of, if you think about it like a camera, we've zoomed out. And so now we can see the whole picture. We can see that we have 4 different quadrants. And you are required to know what quadrant is which. So naturally, just the way that we read, we might think that it starts here with 1. However, that is not the case. So whenever you are labeling the quadrants, one way to remember, it's super easy, is that you draw a C. And since coordinate starts with a C, that's pretty easy to remember. So you follow the C. So the first space where the C begins, this is quadrant 1. Now we write them in Roman numerals, so it looks like a capital I. And then we follow the C. So the next space, the next part of the plane, that's our second quadrant. So that's quadrant 2. So it's a capital I with 2 sticks, is what a lot of people like to say. Continuing with the C, this is going to be quadrant 3. And then last, we have quadrant 4. Now, when we draw quadrant 4, or write it as a Roman numeral, it looks a little different. It's not 4, it is a 1 and then a V, because this represents 5, and we're taking away 1, which means this is quadrant 4. So you draw a C, we have quadrant 1, 2, 3, and 4. All right, now we are going to label these points. So if you look right here, we have point A, and it wants us to go to positive 2, positive 3. So our first point is an x value. The second one is a y value. If you would like to label every single point that is perfectly fine if it helps you remember. If not, just remember x and then y. So we start at 0, we go over to a positive 2, and then that's a positive 3, so we're going to go up 3. So we're just going to put a dot, lands right there on our C, and we are going to label that point A. So here, you could say that point A is in quadrant 1. You could do that by actually plotting it, or if you look here, we have 2 positive numbers, and so you know positive, positive would put you in this space. So our next point is negative 2, 5. So this is our x value, this is our y value. Go over to negative 2, up 5. Here I'd like you to pause the video and continue plotting, and then push play and make sure that you got it right. So here we have C, negative 1, negative 3. So it's going to be over to the negatives now, and instead of going up, we're going down. D is over 4 and down to negative 1. E is 2.5. Now, 2.5 is located between 2 and 3, and it's halfway between. So we're going to go 2, halfway between, and then up 1. You are in 7th grade. Decimals and or fractions are very common at this point, so please do not question yourself or think that you did something wrong just because you have a decimal or maybe even a fraction. Here we do have F is 7/2 over 4. Just a reminder that if you don't know what 7/2 is, a fraction is technically a division problem, so you can do 7 divided by 2. Top number goes in, bottom number goes outside of the house, so it's the numerator divided by the denominator. One easy way to remember is top in, bottom out. Okay, so 2 goes into 7 3 times. 2 times 3 is 6, and you're left with a 1, so you're going to add a decimal and a 0, bring down that 0. 2 goes into 10 5 times. So you would subtract 10 and your division problem is finished. So here, 7/2 is the same thing as 3.5, or 3 5/10 if you want to read it that way. So on our last point, we're going to go over 3.5, which again is halfway between 3 and 4, and we are going to go up 4. So now on the back, here I have this coordinate plane with different smiley faces or different emojis, and you are going to look on the coordinate plane, and then you are going to write it out. Now, just a reminder, when you write coordinate planes, or I guess I should say when you should type them because your assignment is going to be digital, you do need parentheses on each side, and add that comma in between so that we know that it is 2 separate numbers and not one two-digit number. This assignment is on Google Classroom, so head on over there and do it digitally. Make sure you turn it in, and then next we are going to look at square roots, perfect squares, and exponents.